you, Marcy?
Now we'll start with the most exciting thing that gets recorded is a moment of worship. So let's, let's gather together and hold each other in the light. Good evening, friends. Um, so here we are, a week and a day from Inauguration Day. And I was in a meeting with Michaela, who noted that it felt like more than a week. It felt like a very long week. And if there is, oh, just a second. And if there's anything I think is clear now is in 2020 when the words white supremacy culture and systemic racism were used, it was very hard for some people to hear. And I think now we now see the system. It's been laid bare. And though I'm not happy about the things that are happening, I do want to use the strength of seeing the truth of our system and relieving, just letting go of having to worry about that. We now see that voting rights are something that can be won and something that can be lost. Maps can be redrawn. There are many things, and so we stand in that truth now. Now the good thing is that there are so many good things to work on, and in the area of reparations, there's we can work on this at the most local level, our own selves. We can work on it in our homes, our meetings, our communities, and there's nothing stopping us. And that is just a really wonderful thing. The thing about repairs, you already always have what you need, the people you love. So you can always get to it. And so we are in that time. And I have had an experience lately, a few times now, of somebody remembering to me that Quakers, oh, we're so grateful to Quakers because they were abolitionists. And it's sort of interesting hearing it at a time when we're doing all this self-reflection of all the things that we didn't do that we should have done, but to be remembered. And I've had the very powerful experience of meeting somebody I really, really admire and having him say to me, well, Quakers were abolitionists, so of course, we will always be friends. And I thought my ancestors, in that moment, my spiritual ancestors gave me that moment by being true to their calling. And that was so important that it has been remembered and told through generations. And now it is perfectly normal that as the lawsuit came for immigration, which went out yesterday, BYM being one of the plaintiffs, and our meeting at Delphi being another, that even NBC News has it on their website, that one of the oldest religions in America, and suddenly being Quaker is like really important. There's the expectation that the readers of the news will know who Quakers are, even though we think that nobody's really paying attention to us. But I've had people say, and a friend of mine said very sweetly, for your numbers, you really have a very long reach. It was so I just want to stand in the sense that it's kind of a superpower to be Quaker. And I say that understanding all the ways that it's not a superpower, but it is because people made a reputation that we can pick up and use. We don't have to begin at the beginning. And so I just want to say it's we have to embrace all of our resources and that being who we are and being peace loving and being trustworthy really matter right now. So Let me see. So with that in mind, I first of all want to appreciate. I would really like to appreciate Ellen for sort of, for answering things in me that I'm sort of putting out there, and she notices. And I think that's something Ellen probably does, but it's a real gift when someone sees you. And I just want to thank Ellen for that and for her, you know, always constant encouragement. And Ellen is part of the Reparations Action Working Group. And that is a group, we've never called ourselves a support group, but we are, because sometimes people will think that you're just too, I don't know, too optimistic or too whatever working on reparations. And we all think that we're perfectly normal. And so it's really very nice to meet. And so with that group tonight, we have Donna. Where are you, Donna? Is Donna still here? Yes, Donna Hamilton is here. And I think Pierce Hammond will be here. And of course, Alan is here. So those are some of the people. And Nathan Schroyer will be joining us in a little bit. Hi, Ruth. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so I wanted to begin with a statement. Now I made a decision I got too frustrated with Google Docs today. So I'm going to try this with, I'm just going to take a moment to catch my breath. Well, some of you may know that in August, 500 Quakers gathered in Johannesburg, South Africa, part of the Friends World Committee on Consultation, 500, and agreed on a document. So I find that this document just is very blessed by the number of people from around the world. The document was written in 3 languages, and English was the third one. And so when we read through it, Swahili was first, Spanish second, and English at the end. Here is, and so they wrote what they called a tapestry document, and it is full of their concern, the group's concern, and faith. And I don't know if other meetings have read this. Our meeting did read it together. But here are the words, and they come from Quakers from around the world. And I can't, oh, just a second. Oh, I see. Okay. I'd appreciate if somebody would want to read, I would appreciate it. If not, I can, but I'd love to hear another voice. And this will be down to here. And so it could be, 2 people if you'd like. Go ahead, Donna.
We grieve with God for the exponential impact of historical and ongoing injustice. This includes the impact of colonization, forced displacement, slavery, economic exploitation, and racism. We are called to disrupt patterns of oppression and division, to acknowledge offenses, to challenge false notions of white supremacy, to repudiate doctrines of discovery, to make amends, and to work for reparative and retrospective justice. We are called in our Quaker communities to be patterns and examples, to share gifts and skills, to be brave, to become radically inclusive, and to celebrate diversity. Are we all ready to take up these callings? Healing begins with sharing our stories, telling the truth, and listening deeply. There are truths which are uncomfortable to hear about Quaker involvement and complicity in past and present injustice. We need to build or rebuild trust. We pray that in trying to do the right thing, we do not do further damage. We draw inspiration from the Bible and our Quaker values of equality, truth, peace, and justice. We draw hope from the examples we have heard that demonstrate and lead us to recognize, repent, redeem, and restore. More?
And then here is a biblical passage that came with this. And then what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? So that's part of a 2-page document, but this is sort of the what might be the heart of it. And then here are 2 other quotes. And I would like to leave this. Let me see. I can't really. I'd like to have the 2 other quotes if somebody would read. Um, Ellen, would you read the first one? And Daquana, could you read the second one? Okay.
I see no
Go ahead.
I see no reason why Friends, given our positive image worldwide, for our historical commitment to peace, equality, truth, community, and justice, cannot be leaders, innovators, and initiators in these efforts at reconciliation, reconstruction, and rehabilitation.
And from Reverend Peter Jarrett Shell, perhaps the problem is not the question about reparations itself, but rather the limits of my imagination. We must not allow our failures of imagination to limit our calling. If faith means anything, it must mean embracing truths beyond the bounds of our imagination, or else it is not faith at all.
Thank you very much, readers. Thank you. Yeah, the thing about repair, and I think about this a lot, is how different it is from everything else. And I say that because we really do always have the things with us that we need. And when I began to do restorative justice work, it was right before the pandemic, a year before, and then going into the pandemic. So we were on Zoom sometime with juveniles who had been in detention and were allowed out because they were in too grave danger for their lives. And now they were in circles to think about their lives and to think about the kinds of changes they would make. And to name the people that you want to repair things with, and to say the things that you know you did wrong, and to say the things that you want to do and the support you'll need to have that happen is very powerful. And it often happens, and I've done this in my own life, that when we make a mistake, and maybe, as we make a mistake in our life, we decide that we need to get more training, or we decide that we'll do better next time. And we might even talk to people about how we will do better next time. We might buy a book and it will help us do better next time. But we haven't gone back to repair the relationship with the person or the people that then brought the need for the training and all of that. And there is an amazing amount of knowledge in that conflict or in that problem. There's knowledge in it. And this will come up again later, but one of the things that, and I know that probably everyone has experienced it at some point, but in leading a restorative justice circle, you're with people who are not doing so well with each other, often, especially if it's on an outright conflict like a community conference. And so people are, nobody wants to lose. Nobody thinks they're going to win, but nobody wants to lose. And there's talking. And there's always the moment when someone realizes that somebody feels a certain way and they respect it. Like they will say something like, "Oh, I didn't know that you were thinking," or they'll say, "Well, I really didn't do my best that day." And there's something that happens in the room. You feel a shift. You feel a shift in the energy in the room. And it's so powerful. It's when you go from the place of usually thinking this will never work, and that there's a change in breath, and that change in breath changes people in the room. And that's what repair can bring. is that kind of compassion and being with each other and seeing each other differently, usually losing fear, seeing each other face to face, with that idea that um, when we can really see each other in the Spirit's love. And so that's why I find repair so wonderful. We can fill our lives with incidents that we learned from, but we won't necessarily make the world better. We will just leave things undone along the way. And so that is part of my commitment to this, is finding in the bigger world things that I've experienced. I've worked with children a lot of my life, and I started with fifth and sixth graders and moved up to seventh and eighth graders. And people would always say, "Oh, kids fight so much. Oh, what do you do about it?" And what nobody told me before I got into this was how much kids make up. I mean, they know how to make up with each other. They know how to make up with each other in such quick time. There should almost be Olympics for it, because adults almost never can make up that quickly. They have to think about things, and they have and the kids, and I love that. And I think, and often kids repair. Often kids want to do something to make it better for someone. I've been in schools where you encourage the kids to repair. They came up with really great things. I know you hate your job today in the class. I'll do your job for you. Things that are just they seem so small given the gravity sometimes of what the kids have done to each other, but the kids note it as somebody doing something for them. So I'm telling you where my hope comes from. And maybe because I spent years with people making each other mad and making up over and over and over during the day, I realized not everybody has that experience. And so I bring that to you as part of my hope and what I think we all still have inside of us. And so what I'm going to do today is just present an overview of reparations. And I think a lot of you already know a lot, so I'm going to still do it. But I'm also going to talk about the resistance to reparations, because I've decided not to have the elephant in the room. I just figure we will invite the elephant in and we'll just talk about it. What makes us so resistant? And as I wrote down the reasons, I thought they're pretty good reasons. These are not superficial reasons. These are pretty good. So we will go over resistance to reparations. And in all of this, we are going to talk about making up for things, trying to make things better, for things that happened hundreds of years ago to millions of people. Many things can never be made better, and we know that. Many lives lost. That doesn't stop us from asking what's our responsibility today. And I'll share one more personal thing, which I do share from time to time. Into Christmas 2020, I became overwhelmed with how powerful Christmas was. Now, I'm married into a Jewish family, so people are always letting me know that Christmas is a wee bit overwhelming. It's just everywhere. And then in 2020, we did a lot of introspection. And Christmas Eve, I started to make dinner, and I thought my husband was upstairs and I would play the Messiah nice and loud. And I saw it differently. I heard the music as there will be one king, there will be, and rather than it being a celebration, it being a command. And I suddenly felt the oppressiveness of Christianity in a way I just hadn't felt it before. And I felt the oppression of whiteness. And suddenly I could see the centuries. And I had to stop cooking and sit down at the table and just put my head on the table and say, oh my gosh, so much. And within a second, that comforting voice said, don't be discouraged. And so that's what I ask all of us to do. I don't know what we're called to do, but I know we have to look. And I know we can't be discouraged. And whatever things you hear that bring you sorrow, focus on the solidarity you can feel with people in sorrow. Focus on all the ways to use that to turn it into something that truly will bring good to the world. So I just wanted to give that to you. All right. I've had too many thoughts, so just let me just have a moment here. First of all, this is going to be very limited because we're only going to talk about reparations, or mostly reparations for African Americans, beginning with chattel slavery. We do deeply care about reparations for Indigenous people also. We are working on ways to work on that and to work with the the Indigenous Affairs Committee and grow in that also. One thing is that we do have African Americans in our community, and so it does matter how we work on this. And to my knowledge, I don't know anyone Indigenous, which really says something. In our yearly meeting, I assume that there are people, but not who are, talking to me with that identity anyway. But I would just like to say that the focus will be reparations for African Americans. And I hope that by working on any reparations, we are practicing working on reparations for everyone. So for other groups also. All right. Okay. Well, let me just, I'm a little afraid of my computer right now, but I'll try to gain cons. Okay, now I came up with some guiding thoughts. And this is, see, I'm doing a lot of work before we really get to the topic. You might notice this. I haven't given you one word about reparations, really, because I really want to be prepared when we get there. And so I have some thoughts and I will share these with you. Now, these are what I guess I would say are sort of the things that I think are just true. First is as friends, as US Americans, we need to create one history, a history that includes everyone and their contributions, and that includes contradictions that we now find unfathomable. William Penn being an enslaver, unfathomable. We only move forward working on retrospective justice, reparations and reparative actions. That's a subset of retrospective justice. If we can accept that we will not be able to plan all the work before we start, we can't. We're trying to change things. We cannot make a plan before we start. We don't know enough. I would not recommend this if you're building a building, at least from what I know. There are times when you need to know what the end is, but in this, you can't. An acknowledgement is the pivotal step in retrospective justice initiatives because it gives the information and perspective needed to move forward. But acknowledgement is not enough in itself. Doing this step well defines how the other work can be done. Building relationships within our faith community and in our wider community is part of every step of this process. While there are unknowns as we go forward, and I just want to say, I started to panic about the unknowns. Like, oh no, but what if we, and then I thought, oh, that's right. If you build community, then there will be more people as we build community and people with different knowledge and skills than our community currently has. And they will help us together. We will find clearness and guidance. And be open to feeling a shift in your understanding as you gain new information and try out new ideas. You may feel new compassion and understanding and sorrow. Let the shift happen. This is the work of the Spirit changing our hearts. And finally, seek to be comforted, but not comfortable. And I just want to go back to you just a second. Does anyone have any questions at this point? I know we haven't quite started, but, or anything pressing? Okay.
I have a question and that I had put it in the chat, but I don't know if it's appropriate for today. I know there's multiple sessions going on around this, but one of the questions ultimately that would be helpful is, it sounds like there's a BYM reparations group. It sounds like there's a Sandy Spring reparations group. If those two things are distinct, I imagine there's also reparations groups at other monthly meetings. What is the structure and how do they relate to each other? Sort of down the road would be helpful as we.
Well, I can tell you pretty quickly.
Okay.
We're going to try to make a way for them to relate to each other. Right now, it's very informal. It's by who we talk to. But we are actively trying to pull things together. We actually have a really good speaker coming on March 8th, if everybody wants to put that on their calendar. Reverend Robert Turner of Baltimore is coming. He has written a wonderful book, and I'll be talking a little bit about that. But that'll be a way for us to, by inviting people, we hope to find everybody and then, help everybody find each other. So thank you. It's one thing we do want to do. Any other thoughts?
I think Ruth has her hand raised.
Oh, go ahead, Ruth.
Unmute. I'm thinking you'll get into this more, but as you talked about these various phases of working on reparations, acknowledgement is key. It's step number one, has to be done well, and it's not enough. So one of my questions there is how important it is. I mean, it's not a question really. It's really important to do acknowledgement well, because when you've done somebody wrong and you acknowledge, oh, I guess that remark was kind of sharp or something, and actually the whole relationship is wrong or something, where you miss the mark on what you're acknowledging or you haven't acknowledged enough, it's almost worse. So that was one. But then also, if we get deeper and deeper into what we need to acknowledge, we can get stuck. You know that. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to address how do we acknowledge enough, put that somewhere in our souls that we can deal with it and do the right thing.
Well, I would only get into this if I thought the Spirit would help us with discernment. Without that, all would be lost. And I mean that because it is so big. So discernment is a huge part of this. Thank you. And Ruth has done a lot of work on the Indian, what are called boarding schools, and has been part of decolonizing Quakers. So you bring that. Okay, so now
Marcy, could you expand on seek to be comforted but not comfortable?
People have said when we start, and that they just feel uncomfortable hearing certain things. I've had people say, I don't want to talk about complicity statements. A group of us, we didn't do this together. A number of people 2 years ago wrote complicity statements. And I was told it just made this person too uncomfortable that he would never read a complicity statement. He didn't want to think about that. And I thought, I always think of it being comforted by the Spirit rather than needing to be comfortable. And that feels different to me. And not that I don't like being comfortable. I'm a big fan of it. But there are times when it's not possible. And so I think that it's more like hiking. I've gone on hikes and I haven't been comfortable all day, but I got to hike. So
You're talking then about being comforted by the inner spirit and not by, by other people.
Well, by spiritual friends, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But breaking out of, I don't really need to unpack it now. There's something about wanting to be comfortable that feels like a barrier sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's what I was thinking. Pierce, your hand?
Well, I was just going to say, you want to be something other than uncomfortable so you can reach for something beyond that. You're not overwhelmed by the uncomfortability. so that you can't or don't, or you run away. So you need enough comfort to hang in there, even though there's a basic discomfort that is a requirement. So
Right.
it's a matter of finding a balance of a kind, is the way it sounds to me.
I think that's right. I don't want people to be terribly uncomfortable. I didn't mean that. Okay, I'm going to let's get into some. Is that okay? I'm sorry. Here I am. Wait, just a second. Is that okay if I go on now? Okay. All right, so here's some basic terms. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I think you probably know this. But retrospective justice is a term that is not reparations, but it's a kind of a bigger term. And it refers to attempts to administer justice decades or centuries after the commission of a severe injustice or series of injustices against person or communities or nations or ethnic groups. In this case, a crime against humanity. Crimes against humanity have no, what is it when a legal thing times out? They never, there's no legal end to when you can bring
Statute of
something forward for
limitations.
crime of humanity. Thank you. Thank you very much. It has no statute of limitations. So, and that is what chattel slavery was. And so it still is relevant. But it's I've sat with this a lot. I do think that our ancestors are glad for us to seek justice for things that they did wrong, or that they didn't tend to or allowed, whatever that is. I don't think it's disrespecting anyone. We're just seeking to find justice much later than when these things happen. Now, I have a long definition of reparations. Has everyone pretty much read definitions of reparations? I don't want to assume too much. I think that I will go through this kind of quickly. Wait just a second. I have to have Sarah here. Okay. So it's a process of repairing, healing, and restoring a people injured because of their identity and in violation of their fundamental human rights by governments, corporations, institutions, and families. So they've been injured by their group identity, not by something they did. So they're born into this. Those groups that have been injured have the right to obtain from the government, corporation, institution, or family responsible for the injuries that which they need to repair and heal themselves. In addition to being a demand for justice, it is a principle of international human rights law. As a remedy, it is similar to the remedy for damages in domestic law that holds a person responsible for injuries suffered by another when the infliction of the injury violates domestic law. Examples of groups that have obtained reparations include Jewish victims of the Nazi Holocaust, Japanese Americans interned in concentration camps in the US, Alaska Natives for land, labor, and resources taken, and victims of massacre in Rosewood, Florida, and their descendants, Native Americans for violation of their treaties. And political dissenters in Argentina. I think that we can read this list and know that these were never complete reparations, but there were reparations done. And so that's that. Now, the United Nations has four basic categories. There's restitution, there's compensation, rehabilitation, and satisfaction. Those are the result of a process of reparations. I'm happy to share these with you for what they're worth. Now, this is the big thing that is that in the reparations action working group, we keep correcting each other because the thing about reparations is they're about repair, they're about redress, they're not about giving somebody something because you're nice. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with justice. So this is Reverend Robert Turner from Baltimore. He's written a book that some of us think is pretty wonderful, and I will give you the link to that. But he says that making reparations is actually repair or redress of an offense. It's a society's way of atoning for things it has done and correcting the damage that is still present. The damage is still present, even if the damaging acts may be ceased. They are demanded by moral systems as old as Judeo-Christian, Islamic, and Buddhist traditions. Reparations are not charity, they are justice. Crucial to repairing the fabric of our democracy and making the Constitution real for all Americans. And he names 4 areas for reparations: individual, societal, institutional, and spiritual. So this is the big map. Now, I want to separate, that is all one category, and reparations have to do with a specific situation, a specific group of people. At the same time, there are reparative or restorative actions that can be done. This is the second part of retrospective justice. And they're initiatives that are designed to bring social, economic, political justice to African American and Indigenous peoples in the U.S. based on an understanding of the impact that our very inequitable society has had on these groups. So this is general. We know that certain things are true. We know things about health, housing, law. We know things about every category. And so to work on any of those, even if it's not for a particular known population, like in a jurisdiction, it still can be working to make society more equitable. And then that in itself repairs society. Our meeting does these sorts of things, restorative actions. And this can also have to do with correcting the record, making sure people are written into history who have been written out because they just weren't noticed, or we didn't have the habit of including them. It can be all sorts of things that have to do with actions that aren't specific. Now here's first of all, I want to stop sharing for a second. Does anybody have any questions about that? About, you have reparations and you have reparative actions. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, I'm going to jump back in.
Oh, I think Roger has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sure. Roger?
Me.
We can hear you now.
Okay, I just have one concern question, and that is a dimension of harm and pain and what and things that need to be remedied in the process of reparations, and that is the immense, intense personal effect that goes on for generations, as far as self-identity, as far as assuming certain things about yourself or society and that can't be just argued away or counseled away. That dimension is of fundamental concern because it's an extremely deep-seated pain that involves someone's self-view and interpretation of where they stand. And I just wanted to mention it as to being part of the restorative process and how to do that besides bonding in a very deep level, as Quakers can do, and taking them into their hearts. And it's just one dimension that seems intractable, is what I'm saying.
Do you mean the sort of working on self, the reparations, repairing self?
Well, there's an assumption among a lot of people that have been mistreated, even through generations, that they are of no worth, or they are inferior, or that the other person will never change. It's just a dynamic that is part of human nature, and they can't get out of this feeling. It's so deep seated. So that dimension sometimes is very, very necessary and should be addressed also, I think.
And I think Ruth has her hand up as well.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Ruth?
Just a thought on that, and I think you're very right, Roger. That's a major thing to address. It seems like a lot of times if it's a population you're talking about, I've been working mostly in and around indigenous populations, you can't like do it from the outside. You can't like create a better self-image from the outside. It has to be done within that community. So one of the things that Adelphi meeting has chosen to do is to support the National whatever boarding school coalition, which their main work is to do that healing among boarding school survivors in communities. You know, they're training people to do it, to talk together, to do what needs to be done. And I think there are also some organizations within that population, but also in others, that are working on youth suicide, where very often the cause of a high rate of youth suicide is that very thing that you're talking about, that sense of worthlessness, no future that people inherit. So if there's things that from the outside we can support that allows and supports people doing that healing, that's so important.
I think there's sort of a faith that groups know how to find healing. Not that they will come up with it tonight if they start tonight. And you're right to empower those. Another area, just to say that in my county, Prince George's County, Maryland, there have been a number, of initiatives to teach more about Black history, where the agency of people becomes much more clear, where enslaved people aren't just waiting to be saved by white people, but actually are doing things for themselves and things that just have always been in the historical record, never taught. And a number of Black youth have said, I really wish I knew this before. This really changes how I look at things. And that's documented in ways of helping is just letting people see the system that they live in. There are actual programs to teach what oppression is so that young people can understand that it's why they're struggling. You know what? There are a lot of ways to do this, and it's extremely important. Ellen?
If I may,
Two things. The working group on racism for the last couple of years has had a certain amount of money from our BYM budget and divided that money in half. Half of it going for mostly white friends to get educated about all different kinds of things toward anti-racist work. The other half of the money handed over to Friends of Color in BYM toward their healing of trauma. And the other thing I wanted to say was that Zaki has put in the chat his contribution. I can read it if you'd like.
Yeah, please do.
My approach, this is Zaki talking, has been to ask Shepherdstown friends to discover local ways to repair injustices. I find comfort in imagining healing, in seeking a vision of repair. For example, via the NAACP paying for an initial consultation with a lawyer to determine if an aggrieved Black resident has a basis for a lawsuit or reverse a charge by law enforcement, or to reverse a charge by law enforcement.
Thank you. Yeah, you can't fix it all at once, but boy, when you fix, just keep going with it. Yes, Pierce?
So this is a by the way comment for me, because I'm looking at Zaki's lettering by his picture, and it says, oh no, never mind. I made something up. Never mind. I'm not going. not going to say it because I'm wrong.
Well, thank you anyway. Thank you. Okay, now I am going to, just a second. I'm going to go back to where I do want to get just a little more done this evening before we all go off. All right, now here is the resistance to reparations. And I want to do this, I really want you to hold this. I couldn't get it to fit, yeah, it fits here. Just a moment. Okay. This is, and most of these come from, I go to webinars that are given by people in the reparations movement in different jurisdictions, like people in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in California, in Illinois, in places where there are jurisdictions working on reparations. And if you ever want to be in a group of hopeful people, the people doing this work are bursting with hopefulness and plans. And so this is what they say, oh, well, the reasons people don't want to do reparations. It doesn't concern me. My family did not enslave anyone or take anyone's land. It was too long ago. These things don't matter now. It costs too much. We don't have the money as a nation to do this without impoverishing everyone. It won't work, not worth trying and being disappointed. And then from Quakers did so many good things, and that's what matters. We should just focus on the inspiring aspects of our heritage and work to make the world better. There are people that say, I just don't like this. It's not what I want to do. And I think in general, there's a feeling of avoiding liability that liability is in our insurance policies. Liability is a big deal. And it's not just a legal thing, it's a habit. And I think I'm not saying we should never worry about liability, but I think we should be careful when we're in our faith community and start to apply things that are a very strong presence in our life. And I think that's the last one. So I just want to say, reparations are societal. They can be, a family can do something, but generally, if a person is white, they've benefited from a lot of privileges, from a lot of things going their way. And I have anyway, it's down to tiny things to very big things. The idea that it was too long ago is very interesting in a society that through its tax structure really supports generational inheritance of wealth. Like if everybody's life ended when they died and everybody just started over in the family, that'd be one thing. But we do have generational things that we hold on to. And so it's just interesting that when it comes to sorrow and pain and wrongdoing, it's too long ago. But when it's wealth, it's fine. I mean, having owned a house or a business can be passed down bit by bit to future generations. It costs too much. The great thing is in 2 weeks, you'll hear how that's not true. I'm blanking on his name, Ellen. The person doing the third
Coleman Bazelon.
Right. Coleman has done a study, was the person who worked on a study of what it would cost to do reparations. It is a dollar and cents number, and we're used to big numbers, and it's not bigger than that. Not bigger than numbers we're used to. I'm not saying it's nothing, but it's not bigger than we have seen. And it won't work, not worth trying and being disappointed. Don't know what to say. People, if you believe that you ask experts, if you ask people who are actually doing reparations, they say that's not true. They say they're making progress. And I just want to say, all the websites that I've been following for the last 4 years are much better now. They're really sharp looking. There are many more webinars. It's just it's become a well-funded enterprise. Now, the interesting thing is Quakers did so many good things, and that's what matters. People have said this to me, and I think I kind of felt that way at the beginning too. And Lucy Duncan shared an experience in a French journal article, which was she was in a class and hearing that over 100 years, Friends changed their minds. And she thought, that's great. It took a while, but Friends came to the right conclusion. And her friend looked at her and said, but what about all the people who were enslaved that 100 years? And that's again what repair is about. If you're looking at a narrative moving forward, you're always looking at the next step and how you're making it better. So if the narrative is progress, then Quakers won that one. But if the narrative is we're a community that loves each other, we didn't win that one. It's that simple. And so I don't want to take anything away from the wonderful things our ancestors have done. I just want to tell the whole story. And I just don't like this. It's not what I want to do. It's a kind of statement where there's not a sense of connection, a sense of responsibility. And avoiding situations where there's liability, I just leave that all to you. I just kind of named it as, a cultural thing. So I just wanted to bring these up. And I'm not trying to I'm saying that I don't really want to go into all of these more than this. These are very common things. And I just want to affirm that wherever people are talking about reparations, they are talking about resistance to reparations too. Otherwise, we would be doing it. So, and so in terms of justice, which is what this is really about, Harold Weaver asks the question. This is Dr. Harold Weaver, and he wrote the Pendle Hill pamphlet, Race, Systemic Violence, and Retrospective Justice. And he says, what's the relationship between equality and justice in the world, and I add, in the world and in the Religious Society of Friends? Can there be peace without justice? And can there be equality without justice? And these are very important questions for us to carry with us. Okay, so how do we get there? And so I have some ideas and plans, and I'm just going to look at all of you. So these are, going to go through this really quickly and then come back to you. The first thing is we educate ourselves and prepare for a retrospective justice journey. We learn history anew. We use our testimony of equality to guide us. What if we wrote a history that included everyone? And then, see, I might just stop with these first two. The second one really came up in our meeting, make a formal commitment to retrospective justice. When our meeting first talked about reparations, it was in a Peace and Social Concerns meeting. And the story is that one friend who has passed away and was our sort of moral leader in our meeting said that she wanted to work on reparations. And an African-American friend said, oh no, you don't work on that until you're really ready to see it through. That's a big deal. Because you're going to be, she didn't say this, but you would be opening up pain. You would be asking people to consider all of this and then not to stick with it and to go off to the next thing. And she said, you have to promise that you're going to stay with it. And so we did. We did promise. And we are sticking with it. But it is making a commitment because you don't know where you're going and it's hard. And no offense, white people, but we do have the reputation for having many good ideas and then not following through. And that just can't work. It won't work with reparations. And so here we make a formal acknowledgement. I want to go into this much more next time on the way we have harmed others. Make a commitment to truth telling. And that is to create a clear and historical record of events and to inscribe that record in the collective memory of our institutions and nations. So it means we as meetings come up with our own histories that we all agree on. Everyone's included and we make it ours. And then to make amends. So you can see there's a lot of thought about the first ones, and it gets smaller and smaller as you go along because it's less known what will be there. So now I'm just going to say, so that's what friend Harold Weaver came up with. Now a priest, Episcopal priest, came up with 6 stages that are not in conflict but are different. That from the beginning you have to build relationships in your wider community so you can understand the harm that has been done better. You can start to become close to people. You get out of what some people call a white bubble. Not everybody is in one, but people are to different degrees. And get to know what is important to people and hold that. Just keep that with you. Then we educate ourselves in as many ways as possible. Now, being a religious person, a Christian, talks about public confession, which I think would be maybe the same as acknowledgement, but it's a little bit different. And then repentance. And that's a word that we just don't really use. We don't use confession and we don't use repentance among friends. But repentance would be that you want to change what you're doing. So acknowledgement alone is saying, it's not the same as saying, and therefore I'm going to do this differently in my life. And then to make amends. And then he adds at the end an evaluation. Are we finished? What do we have to do next? How's it going? So I just wanted to ask you, what you think about all that and what you think about words. And I know that we are 6 minutes away from the end. So I can give you these questions to think about. But what words would Quakers want to use? What frame? I mean, Dr. Harold Weaver is a friend. And now there's more of a reparations movement going, and maybe he would even, adjust that. But I would like us all to think about this, and I would like us to share this next time. What are the words that really speak to us from our testimonies, from our faith? What do we think would work for working on reparations? I'm afraid that's what I have for you tonight. Are there any thoughts, I was going to give this to you to think about. I'm happy to share these slides with you if I can email them to you. I'm not quite sure. Callie?
I really love the question, how would we change?
I'm Tom.
I have been thinking about the relationship between Sandy Spring Friends Meeting and the local Black churches. And, although it's true that many of the participants or members of those two organizations were not, their families and their ancestors were not involved in the structures of oppression in this community. But my family and my ancestors were involved in these structures of oppression in this community. And when you mentioned that after 100 years of discussion, we may have won this one, but about the 100 people, of course, 100 years of suffering, well, the suffering continued long after manumission and the establishment of a free Black community here. The suffering continues today. The inequity continues today. Of course, everyone on this call knows that, but I just want to say that, when I was a child in Sandy Spring, we talked about how noble it was of the Friends to free these enslaved persons 60 or 100 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. But today, and even throughout my adult life, what's been so painfully obvious is the inequality that remains as a residue from those legal structures of inequality. But inequality continues in so many, it's been manifest in so many ways. And so I'm sorry to speak for too long, but a part of this that's been of interest to me is whether our meeting can be engaged in some significant effort, restorative justice effort with the Black churches, because these are institutions that have been in this community for hundreds of years and have members who have experienced these inequities. And it's become really obvious to me that we need to be in a conversation with our partners who might be on the receiving end of something, to see that we don't bungle that just entirely with our own conceptions on our own side of this of what the answer is without them being full partners in the discussion about how can we move forward together.
Right. There's a lot of Peter Jarrett Shell talks about this, of finding the balance of including people in discussions in such a way that they want to be involved, and needing people, and yet people maybe not wanting to be involved. So to find that sweet spot where, it's really what everybody wants to be doing. But it is really important. And yes, it does go on. I hope that next time we can talk more about Sandy Spring and what Sandy Spring wants to do.
2 other hands raised.
Yes, Ruth? You're muted, Ruth.
What Tom was saying really rings a bell with me that I was doing some musing with the Decolonizing Quakers folks recently about the different stages of what it would take to decolonize that are very similar to the kinds of steps that you're talking about there, building relationships and that sort of thing. But what had occurred to me was that there's this step that we don't quite talk about that's somewhere down there beyond building relationships, and somewhere maybe inclusion happens in there somewhere. But the word collaboration is a word that I haven't seen that much in these kinds of lists, which is sort of what Tom was talking about, like being in full partnership with, let's say, some Black churches or other organizations or whatever, which not only makes it possible to do the right thing in terms of moving resources between the 2 groups, but also those 2 groups together can build a kind of creativity that can help to change the structure, either in that local area or, you could think big, in something, a bigger structure. But that kind of collaboration among communities where there has been harm, there is repair is building, has some potential to it beyond just that immediate repair in that city or in that town. It gives me a lot of hope.
I just want to say, going to one session where people were talking about people who had been enslaved, meeting family members who had been enslavers, and working on the dynamic. And some very interesting relationships had been developed. And so people were talking about the ways that white people needed to change. And then somebody said, well, how do Black people need to change? And the person said, we have to stop being skeptical to do this work. And I think that building trust and all of that, I think collaboration is wonderful, but it's such a precious thing. And to give it the time and the space to have everyone practice new relationships is really a big thing to do. We're at 8:16. And so I am aware that we're at the end of our time. So do you want to stay another 5 minutes, or I'm happy if we have. Okay. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Oh, I just wanted to highlight Erin's contribution in the chat about the Coalition for the Dismantling of the Doctrine of Discovery. Thank you for shouting that out, Erin.
And Tom is doing the fifth. You're doing one of the reparations evenings, right? Okay. And what will you be speaking on?
The story in Sandy Spring and my personal connection to it, because my ancestors were the enslavers, and I am personally the beneficiary today of the inequity that was established at the outset of the very founding of Sandy Spring by Quakers, people of European descent. The founders of the first families of Sandy Spring were enslaving people of European background, 3rd-generation Marylanders, and plantation owners and tobacco growers. And the wealth of that system grew very, very rapidly, such that the first arriving ancestor, James Brooke, my name is Thomas Brooke Farquhar, the first arriving ancestor amassed an estate of 20,000 acres over 60 years of tobacco growing in Sandy Spring. 20,000 acres, yeah.
Okay, so we can hear about that in a few weeks. Thank you. Thank you for taking all this in. And I know that a lot of this is familiar, and I hope, I hope that we're sort of considering this over and over again. And next week, the focus will be going through the first steps very carefully and thinking about how we make them into steps that can be done, and to hear from people in Sandy Spring and what you all want to do.
Thanks for watching our video. For more content from Sandy Spring Friends Meeting, click to subscribe.